We were looking to find an old LZ in a place called Charlie Ridge. You said you had neighborhoods and areas that were hotter than others in Ramadi. We had the same thing, of course, in Vietnam. Some places were known as hot spots. You'd almost guaranteed, somebody was going to shoot a few rounds at you, coming in or going out if they didn't find you or you didn't find them during your patrol. But we were supposed to flip-flop. We'd go in and another team would come out on the top of this mountain, and the team had gotten lost. They didn't know where they were. So they finally somehow, scraped their Sierra together, and we went out and we flip-flopped with them, but we were way far away from this. They were 3,000 or 4,000 meters away from this mountaintop where we were supposed to flip-flop with another team. So I really pushed the patrol to find it. This place was really hard to find if these guys couldn't find it. No, they just were lost. But we found that thing on the second day, an old fire base on the top of this mountain, like 3 years of sea rats on the side of the mountain because we had NVA walking trail below us. They'd stop and have lunch there, eat old seas. Ham and lima beans, I think, supplied half the NVA in Vietnam because Marines just always pitched those things. Nobody ate. We call them ham and mothers. Nobody ate them. But so we had a flip-flop. So I didn't want to get too far away from this LZ because I wanted another LZ within, 3 or 4 clicks. So we were going to, we harbored that night, moved off into the jungle outside the LZ, harbored that night, had some big rocks around us. Thought we were in a good position. And at night, I would pre-plot fires, artillery targets north, south, east, west around our position in case you had to call them in the middle of the night. You didn't have to figure out what's our 6 numbers here. No, these targets were already plotted in. So we woke up the next morning, and we were just going to kind of lay low all day long in that area. It wasn't something you really wanted to do, but since we were scheduled to flip-flop, and battalion really wanted us to do that because it hadn't worked, when we had gone in. We should have gone in where we were going out. But they wanted to flip-flop. So I said, but we're just going to lay low for this day, and then we'll be out of here the next morning. Well, that morning, I guess some, 12-man NVA recon patrol walked close aboard or came by close aboard us. We never heard them. But they either saw a flash of motion, because we were eating breakfast, or they heard us, which I don't think they did because we were super quiet. But all of a sudden, all this automatic fire opened up, and fortunately it was over our heads, because that's pretty typical happening in the jungle. Mm-hmm. You shoot high. But I had a big rock kind of behind me, so I'm getting guys maneuvered around, starting to call the artillery in, when a bullet apparently hits the rock behind me, comes back, hits me in the head from behind, goes forward. Boom, I'm down. And I'm almost history. Next thing I know, my corpsman is doing a pat down on me. Apparently the bullet had gone through my floppy cover and didn't knock it off. And it wasn't until he saw blood starting to run down the side of my face that he realized that the wound was up here, but because there was nothing visible. So he's doing a pat down, and I knew what that meant. I knew I'd been shot, and I knew he didn't know where it was. But I never did figure out it was in my head or in the head. I concluded sometime that morning, because we were on the ground for about another 4 hours before they tried to get us out, that I had been bitten by a centipede. They had some nasty centipedes over there whose venom apparently attacked your central nervous system. So that was my working theory that morning, was that I had been bit by a centipede, which really pissed me off.
How long were you unconscious for after you got hit?
I was unconscious just for a few seconds because, 1 minute I'm kneeling, I'm a lean, green, mean fighting machine, and the next moment I'm lying down, I'm a lean, mean, green stalk of broccoli.
How much time had passed between the initial fire, incoming fire, and you getting hit?
It was really just a matter maybe of 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'm trying to get guys positioned. In recon, we did not want to fire back. If somebody, started firing at you, they didn't really know where you were, especially with this fire going high. And the last thing you wanted to do really was fire back because now we know where they are. And then they, So the deal was not to fire back. Just bring in supporting arms as quick as you could. But eventually, of course, the guys started to fire back because it was just a little too hot.
And I just thought of this. I'm guessing you guys wouldn't carry like a heavy machine gun with you, like an M60 or something?
No, we didn't. Too heavy, and then we had two more guys tasked with ammunition. Mm-hmm. And you can't really, get one of those things set up quickly, in the jungle. But occasionally we did. Occasionally, the warning order that I would get from battalion would say, you're taking an M60 on this patrol because we've had reports of X, Y, and Z in this area, and you might need it. So great. Obviously, somebody had to volunteer to do that, and my littlest guy, his nickname was Mouse. He would always volunteer to carry the M60. Great kid. Never really had to use it in the jungle, which was good, but occasionally we carried it.
So here you are, you're 5 minutes into this gunfight, you get hit, you're unconscious for a very short period of time, and then you come back to, and how do you feel when you come back?
Again, I didn't know what had happened. Again, my first thought was the centipede thing, but sounds were muffled, color was gone, things were moving slowly in black and white around me, and sounds were very muffled. By now, the artillery was starting to come in. We had a brand new second lieutenant with us. He was on his first snap-in patrol. He apparently assumed command, along with my experienced corporal, who normally was the patrol leader for this patrol. And together they managed the situation. And we got everybody out. I was the only one wounded. Take that back. Crew chief on the helicopter that picked us up was wounded. He was on a .50 caliber and got hit in the hand. But we were the only two wounded. I was the only guy on my patrol wounded. The corpsman, outstanding, second-class hospitalman, he kept me alive for the next 4 hours until they could get me into Da Nang.
How bad were you bleeding?
Apparently I bled out. There's a cavity down the center of your head called the superior sagittal sinus. It's like an upside-down triangle, and it drains blood in your brain, and that was nicked by the bullet. It was just close enough to midline to nick the superior sagittal sinus. And I can remember my corpsman just kept putting battle dressing after battle dressing on my head. That ruined my whole day, needless to say.
Were you like passing back out and then waking back up?
I was. I remember I knew I could hear the helicopter coming in, and I knew we were about to break out of the jungle to run to the Z that the helicopter was coming in that we had been on the day before. So I took all the strength I could to open my eyes and look up, and all I saw were tracers converging kind of over us from all points of the compass. Damn, this is serious.
I got some information that your kids gathered up, and one of them was a note from Captain Frederick Rick J. Wilson III, and he wrote this little kind of description of what happened. He says, "I was the pilot of the CH-46 YT TAC 13 MMH 164 that rescued your team. What you couldn't know was that a lot of people, including your recon team, were responsible for getting you to the hospital. I vividly remember the mission because my crew chief was wounded." That's the guy you just talked about.
Right.
He, like you, also survived and prospered. He and I received silver stars for our actions that day. You tend to remember things like that. I flew 928 missions in Vietnam, and that one was my hairiest. I first heard that your team was in trouble and you were wounded when I was landing at Da Nang Hospital with another medevac. Because of your head injuries, I was able to get a corpsman at the hospital before I headed out for the rescue. It turned out to be the corpsman Terry Daly, was from my hometown of Wakefield, Rhode Island. I found this out 20 years later when Terry's wife showed up at my sister's house with an old copy of Stars and Stripes that covered the mission. Your team evidently ran into an NVA base camp that no one knew was there and was greatly outnumbered. Because of your wounds and the combat situation, an extraction was requested and I was the closest to the action. The problem soon became apparent that the team needed to move about 200 yards to an old bomb crater where I could land. I called for gunship support and some fast movers. What I got was 4 flights of Phantoms dropping bombs pretty close to the team and 4 Huey gunships. I was circling overhead for about an hour before the team got to the only feasible landing zone on the ridge. They did a good job suppressing fire until I was landing. Fortunately, the bomb crater also protected me somewhat, and we were able to get everyone on board. I was a little short on fuel, but that worked on my favor because I was also about 2,000 pounds over gross, according to my co-pilot, who was wondering if we could lift off. In the meantime, your team and my gunner were engaged in a firefight. Your team knocked out all the windows on my bird, but I didn't object because they were covering my butt. We managed to take off and took a few hits out on the way, but thanks to the Hueys escorting me, I was able to dive off the ridge and get out of range. Long story short, we were able to get everyone to the hospital, and the NVA got a beating. So he had to just take off and just fly over this ridge right as...
Yeah, apparently he just kind of dove off the ridge and, gained speed, came back up. I heard that this thing was so riddled with bullets, this helicopter, was that the Marine Corps helicopter facility was across this highway from the hospital in Da Nang. They wouldn't fly it over there. They called for a tug to tow it over there. I think we're going to try to put that thing back in the air that day.
Oh, man. He continues on, and this was a nice... I'm taking bits of this from a nice letter that he wrote, but he says, I understand that you count that day as an alive day, which is a very good thing to celebrate. I was probably one of the few Marines who enjoyed their tour in Vietnam, primarily because I was saving lives and rescuing recon teams. I also love the flying, since they would never let you fly like that back in the States. One of the best things to come out of Vietnam was the improvement in medical care. You are proof of that, as the survival rates from as are the survival rates from Iraq and Afghanistan. Hope you have a wonderful 50th rebirthday. Happy birthday, Marine. And that, once again, that's Captain Frederick Rick J. Wilson III.
Yeah, he was the command pilot that day, and that bird that pulled me and the team out saved all our lives. No question about it. Were you guys under the threat of being overrun at some point soon? I tell you the truth, Jocko, I have no idea, really. My memory of that day was pretty sketchy.
So I talked to him on the phone last year, and he said they had to circle overhead for an hour because they just couldn't set it down. There was no possible way, and they estimated probably 200 NVA on the ground, and that's part of the reason why they weren't able to fly it back to squadron, because small arms fire through rotor blades.
As an infantry officer, I always felt very comfortable on the ground and very exposed on the helicopter. I just figured those were things were flying magnets that made a lot of noise. But of course, the aviators felt just the other way. They felt safe in their birds and never wanted to be on the ground. Never.
I feel the exact same thing as you. I didn't never liked any sort of machine. I didn't like any of them. I wanted to just be on my feet.
Exactly.
So, and yeah, that feeling that you have in a helicopter when you're up flying, and all you see is all I see when I'm flying in a helicopter is threats. And you can't even come close to covering them all. At least on the ground, I can cover some of the threats. When you're in an aircraft, it's like I'm waiting to get shot down. That's what it feels like to me. When do you remember coming to, or when do you remember what they do with you once you got in the hospital? Do you remember much of that?
No, I remember the helicopter landing because my head bounced on the metal. I was like, damn, couldn't I put something underneath my head? And I remember them picking me up and putting me on a stretcher because they grabbed my belt and picked up my middle, and it felt like a garrote just going right through me. I faintly remember the sound of hearing this guy that sounded like he was on the other side of a football field saying, negative vitals, negative vitals, negative vitals. And then the next thing I felt this crush on my chest. And I thought, that's okay, because, they're getting the heart back up. Checking,
Oh, so they were doing CPR.
Yeah. Well, I was apparently resuscitated 3 times just after the helicopter landed at the NSA Da Nang, the hospital. But my corpsman had been straddling me the whole time in the helicopter and was pushing on the heart to keep blood flowing. It was It's not my best day, but hey, well, I'm here talking about it, so
we'll take it.
That makes a huge difference, believe me, because there's no reason I should be. When I left Bethesda after a year, my attending physician was the chief of neurosurgery. He called